Hello and welcome to the Fin to the Woods podcast with me, Finian Hackett. I hope you're all doing very well and have had a lovely week and a bit since the last episode. I hope you enjoyed, in some sense, my episode last week talking about Gavin Creel, Maggie Smith and Ken Page and kind of honouring their careers and all that they've achieved. It was really interesting for me to research all of them and find out a bit more about them and kind of just delve a bit more into their careers, and it's made me go and watch films that they're in or listen to shows that they're in. So it was good for me, and I hopefully that you've managed to listen to it and also gone and looked at more of their work as well. But on this week's episode, we're back to normal business as usual, and we're going to be talking about one of my theatre trips in the past week and also all the latest theatre news and ongoings from around the world. Right, let's get into it. Let's first talk about my theatre trip, and that was to Birmingham to see Becoming Nancy at the Birmingham Rep. So this was a trip that I wanted to take because I had 4 friends in it: Lucas, Harry, Isaac and Ollie, who I wanted to go and support in the show, and I thought I was just excited to see them do something and just wanted to go and support them. So that was my main reason for the trip. The musical itself, Becoming Nancy, has interested me since its kind of birth a few years ago. Back, I think it was in 2019, it had its world premiere in Atlanta, and this is a new Stiles and Drew musical. Stiles and Drew wrote the music for Honk, Just So, Betty Blue Eyes, also some of the songs in Mary Poppins as well in the stage musical. They've done a lot, and I think they are our best composing duo, or one of them. I think they're a really strong British composing team, and I love all their work, and I listen to a lot of the shows that they do. So I was excited for this and followed it from its inception in Atlanta, and I didn't know anything about this show when it was in the States. I kind of grasped that it was set in the 70s here in the UK, and it had Jessica Vosk in it, and it had Lizzie B in it, and it had Sally Ann Triplett in it. It had a really good cast, and I only knew one song, which was the song Night Bus, which they released when it was out there, but also I saw Jessica Vosk in concert a couple of years ago, and she sung that song with the co-star Lizzie B, and that was really nice to hear that song in person. So going into it, I literally only knew that song, and it was by Stiles and Drew, and it vaguely looked like it was from the 70s, just from that Atlanta production. So fast forward a few years to now, and it's making its UK premiere at the Birmingham Rep, and it was, I have to say, a fabulous show. I've never been to Birmingham before. I have to admit, I don't think I was missing much, but I had never been up to Birmingham, so it was fun to go up with my friend Bradley. We went up, stayed up there, got to kind of just wander around the big old shopping centre, which was lovely. And the Birmingham Rep itself is a really lovely theatre, produces a lot of great work throughout the year, and is quite a well-respected venue, and they put on a lot of great stuff. So I was excited also to go there and see the auditorium and see the space. And it's a lovely building. It was very hot inside. It was quite cold outside, but my lord, it was boiling. The foyer was so hot, and the auditorium was even hotter. So if you are going, be prepared to just bring layers, I would suggest, if you are going to go. And it was just lovely because I bumped into Izzy, who I also know, who had come to see the show as well. So we bumped into her, which was really lovely. And yeah, so I literally had no expectations, but the set was this really cool kind of school hall, kind of village hall. It was a school hall, but it looked like one of those village hall stages that you see in kind of every little town and village across this country. And I just loved it because it really just set the scene that, oh, we're in that era. And it's set in 1979, East Dulwich in London. And it tells the story of this boy, David Starr, and he is cast as Nancy in the school production of Oliver. You might be thinking, well, that's a bit weird, but it's because the drama teacher says they basically haven't got enough talent and they're going to just cast the parts of who is best for them no matter what, because they can't pick and choose because everyone's not that good, basically. So he gets cast as Nancy, hence the name Becoming Nancy. See, I didn't even know that when I went to see it. I was like, what's this going to be about? But then it clicked after I read the Wikipedia page about it. So the whole story is about him and his family and them kind of putting on the show. The show becomes a bit of a backstory throughout because it focuses more on David Starr's life and his relationships and him coming out to his parents and his family and him getting bullied at school and his best friend and the racism that she receives at school. So it sounds like quite heavy, but it's so well written and so well developed as a show. You have those really joyful, happy moments where David Starr kind of starts to, spoiler alert, just so you're aware, starts to fall in love with kind of this other boy who is a bit sporty, but also is part of the drama club as well, and is really lovely, and their relationship kind of blossoms as well, and that's a nice kind of undercurrent throughout the whole show. But it has its emotional moments. It has the scene when David comes out to his mum and dad, and the mum was initially saying, oh, she'll love him no matter what, and this, that, and the other. But when it actually comes to it, she's quite taken aback by it and isn't necessarily happy about it. So it's a really interesting portrayal of situations like that, which I don't think you necessarily often see in mainstream musicals. Yes, musical theatre is a very kind of gay and LGBTQ friendly atmosphere, but the stories themselves aren't necessarily around that often. And for me, as a gay man, seeing a story like that play out on stage I found it quite emotional, actually. Not that I necessarily had any issues with coming out when I did, but I found it really I just found it emotional watching a story like that about two young gay people just having a nice time and it all kind of working out in the end. I mean, they do say, again, this is full of spoilers, but they do say at the end that David and the boyfriend don't end up staying together. They aren't a forever couple, and they do drift apart because the families move away, etc. And I think that's also quite refreshing as well, because with things like Heartstopper and things along the same vein, when they talk about these gay relationships, it's all very happy-clappy. Oh, look, we've ended together and we're going to get married and that's it. However, to show that, yes, it was lovely that they were together at one point, but ultimately it didn't work out, but they still kind of managed to form a relationship and it helped him to become who he is today. And I like that. It doesn't show that it's always just going to be the first relationship you have is the one that's going to last forever. And I think that's also a good element to it. So I was just really impressed by it because I had no expectations. And it is camp as tits, oh my lord. So he has 3 posters on his bedroom wall, David, and they are of Sting, Blondie, and Kate Bush. And so these posters then come to life towards the beginning of Act 1, and they become kind of his Greek chorus, his support act, that kind of thing. And it is just hilarious, and it is so camp, and it's played by the actors who play the mum, the auntie, and the drama teacher. They also kind of a double rolling, and it's just hilarious. There's a number when they go to a club in Brighton and Donna Summer appears and there's a whole disco number. It's just camp, but also so moving, and there's really emotional songs as well. And the songs have really stuck in my mind. There's only a few out on kind of like a demo cast recording on Spotify, but I need the whole thing because they are stuck in my brain and they will not leave. And that is a good sign for a show where you can't even listen to some of those songs. I think it's brilliant. Obviously, this was previews when I saw it, so things will have changed. I think they were freezing the show last week, something like that. So I think there was a few more days after I went before the show would be frozen, and then I think it opens at the end of this week. So I'm wishing it the best of luck because it deserves loads of audiences, and I really hope it does end up transferring to the West End because so much tut ends up in the West End and so many rubbish things end up getting quite lengthy runs, and it frustrates me to the core because shows like this, new British musicals, might not get that chance. So please, if you can, go and support Becoming Nancy. It's only on till the 2nd of November. It's only a month-long run. So do go and support if you can, but I'm sure you will see about it online and might have seen about it already. But yeah, a brilliant show with fabulous music and a lovely, heartwarming and also heart-tugging storyline as well. So yeah, big fan. So let's crack on and talk about all the latest new productions that have been announced in the last week or so. So Andrew Scott will reprise his Olivier-nominated performance in the Olivier Award-winning production of Vanya off-Broadway in 2025. So this will be from March next year, and I'm sure it will do very well over in the States. I didn't get to see it over here because it sold like hotcakes and the tickets were very expensive. I think it was filmed for cinema release as well, but I never got to see that either. But I'm glad it's going off Broadway rather than on Broadway, because I think sometimes, especially in America, the difference between off Broadway and Broadway is quite big financially, and a lot of the time some don't necessarily fit on Broadway but would fit so well off Broadway but go to Broadway anyway. I think quite a good example of that is My Sons Are Queer. I know that ended up not opening on Broadway for financial reasons and this, that and the other, but I think that would do so well off Broadway. Not saying it's not worthy of being on Broadway, but I just think it would work better in a more intimate house off Broadway. I don't know, that's just my opinion, but I'm glad that Vanya is getting the chance to go over to the States, and to be honest, it might end up transferring to Broadway, because they'll want probably Andrew Scott to get Tony nominated, and who wouldn't want that? Along a similar vein, Sarah Snook from Succession's one-woman performance of The Picture of Dorian Gray, which we saw earlier this year in London, will transfer to Broadway in March 2025. So again, this was around the same time as Vanya, and it's a one-woman version of The Picture of Dorian Gray, with her playing multiple different characters throughout. She won an Olivier for this performance, and I have no doubt she will be in high contention for the Tony Award next season. There's been 3 pretty big musical announcements for the next Broadway season as well. So Jason Robert Brown and Taylor Mack's new musical Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil will open next year in 2025. It had its world premiere earlier this year with Sierra Boggess and J. Harrison G. and Tom Hewitt in it, and it also had rave reviews. It looks brilliant, and Sierra Boggess had this amazing wig on. She was like a socialite southern woman, and I just loved her Instagram videos she did of her like learning the accent and saying certain words. They really made me laugh. Also opening next spring is Just in Time, the Bobby Darin musical, a jukebox musical about the music of Bobby Darin, and it will play the Circle in the Square Theatre, which they're going to turn into an intimate nightclub with a live big band. And Jonathan Groff will be leading this musical. Obviously, he's a recent Tony Award winner for Merrily We Roll Along, and this could put him in front-runner contention in the Best Actor in a Musical category for the second year in a row, which is interesting because, as you well know, if you listen to the podcast or if you see me on TikTok ranting away, the Best Actress in a Musical category this year is really, really, really difficult to call. No one really knows. Nicole Scherzinger is currently front of the pack, but you've got Audra in Gypsy opening in a few weeks' time, and also Death Becomes Her coming in as well as many other things. So that is going to be a tight race. But the lead actor in a musical category is slightly more open to interpretation. You have Tom Francis for Sunset Boulevard, and also James Monroe Iglehart for A Wonderful World. They're the kind of other 2 in my mind currently that I can think of that could be up for Best Actor in a Musical. But now you also have Jonathan Groff. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that race. And the other musical that they've announced opening next spring is Operation Mincemeat. So this will be transferring from the West End over to America. The previews will begin on February the 15th and open on March the 20th at the Golden Theatre. So this is a 2-time Olivier Award winning musical, and it will be interesting to see how it does over in America because it is very British as a storyline. It's a very British show, so it'll be interesting to see how it translates in the States. And I know that there's kind of been this back and forth with them possibly going, possibly not going, and they put out polls, and I think it was kind of they put out kind of opinion things being like, well, do you think this would work on Broadway? And asked people their opinion. I wasn't quite sure what was going on, to be honest, and I didn't understand who had been sent it, but I saw it online and it confused me somewhat because they seemed to be unsure whether they were taking it to Broadway or not, but now they are. So they must have decided on the problem. But again, this is kind of falls into the argument of should this go off Broadway rather than on Broadway, but we'll have to wait and see how it does. But yes, so Operation Mincemeat, Just in Time, and The Garden of Good and Evil all opening next year on Broadway. Also in the States, the new production of Passing Strange, which premiered at the Young Vic earlier this year with Giles Terera, will transfer to North America to the ART in Massachusetts in May 2025. That's another transfer of a West End production. And also, slightly different, Hugh Jackman will do a 12-show run at the Radio City Music Hall in 2025 called From New York with Love. So this will begin on the 24th of January and then will be select weekends all the way through to August the 15th and 16th. And it will feature songs from The Boy from Oz, The Music Man, The Greatest Showman, and many more, apparently. So if you want to go and catch Hugh Jackman at the Radio City Music Hall, you have about 6 months to do so. Over here in the UK, we've also had quite a few new productions and transfers announced. The new play Kyoto will transfer for 16 weeks to Soho Place next year. This is based around the Kyoto 1997 Climate Summit, which was quite a major summit in regards to the legislation that it got several countries to sign. It had a successful run at the RSC earlier this year and is now making its way to the West End. Also, the Old Vic in London will hold the world premiere of The Brightening Air, which is written and directed by Conor McPherson, who famously led Girl from the North Country at the venue, which was a huge success back in 2017, and that will run from April to June of 2025. Sing Street will have its UK premiere next summer at the Lyric Hammersmith, and this is based on the film of the same name, and the show was set to open on Broadway in 2020, but got cancelled due to COVID and then never came back. It never reopened, unfortunately. However, they did make an original Broadway cast recording, even though the show never did actually open on Broadway, which I think's quite entertaining. But that will be heading over here for the first time next year. Also, Matilda will be heading out on another UK tour, beginning at the Leicester Curve next October, before heading to Bradford, Liverpool, Plymouth, Sunderland, Edinburgh, Manchester, and many more to come, I'm sure. And then also Nine, the musical, will receive a concert production at the Lowry in Salford with Ramin Karimloo in the lead role of Guido, and this will be on the 1st and 2nd of February. And there seems to be quite a lot of concert productions of Nine done, because I think it's quite an easy show to do. It doesn't really have an ensemble. It's an ensemble piece, as in all the principals kind of work together, but there's no big dance numbers or anything like that. So it seems quite an easy concert to do with lots of famous people as well. So it's done quite often. I know Vanessa Williams did a concert version of it a year ago about, or maybe a bit more. So it's a popular show to do in concert, and if you want to catch that, that's next February. But for me, the most exciting piece of theatre news, and this is proper personal kind of excitement, because not many people will know anything about this, is the news that Mrs. Santa Claus will have its world premiere at Goodspeed in America in 2025. So this is based on the 1996 made-for-TV musical of the same name, which starred Angela Lansbury. It was written for Angela Lansbury, and the music and lyrics are by Jerry Herman, who is behind hits such as Hello Dolly and La Cage and Mame and Mac and Mabel, a brilliant and well-celebrated musical theatre composer. This is my favourite Christmas film, and I've watched it every single year religiously, multiple times every year. I love it, and I can quote for you the majority of the film, and I've been saying for years and years and years that this needs to be adapted for the stage, because the majority of the score is there, and the story is there. It will obviously need some padding out, but it will be a great stage musical, and I cannot wait to see what they do with it. I'm slightly worried because the writer of the screenplay isn't doing the script for the stage show. I was hoping that he would be, but he's not. So it'll be interesting to see what the changes are, and hopefully they don't mess around too much with the storyline and with the characters, because I will be quite critical. I think I'm one of the biggest Mrs. Santa Claus fans in the world. I think me, my father and my sister, between us, I think we form the fan group. So that'll be from November to December of 2025. So next Christmas, so quite a while away yet. We don't know who's going to be in it or really much more about it, but I am just thrilled that after years of begging for this to happen, it is finally happening. But with every new production announcement, there is also some closing announcements as well. So Water for Elephants will close at the Imperial Theatre on Broadway on December the 8th after 301 performances and 25 previews. So this is a 7-time Tony-nominated musical from last season, but it didn't win any, but it did win the Outer Critics Circle Award and Drama Desk Award for Best Director for Jessica Stone, and also the Drama Desk for Sound Design, Fight Choreography and Puppetry. Some really unique categories there, but that will be closing later this year. And also another Broadway musical has announced its closure. Suffs will close on January the 5th next year, so this will have played 24 previews and also 301 performances, weirdly, and this won the Tony for Best Book and also Best Original Score. And with this closing, it means that the only musical on Broadway which won Best Book of a Musical still open, and the most recent one will be Hamilton from 2016. All other winners in that category have closed. So the most recent Best Book of a Musical Tony winner still on Broadway will be Hamilton, but the most recent score winner will be Six, which is still running, and that won the Tony back in 2022. However, there is good news on top of the closure of Suffs, because they have announced a national tour which will open in Seattle in September 2025. One of the biggest theatre news stories of this past week or two has been about the dimming of the lights on Broadway for Gavin Creel. So there has been this big hullabaloo about this whole situation, and basically they have announced now that all the Broadway lights will dim separately on different occasions for Gavin Creel, Maggie Smith and Adrian Bailey, but this is only after so much protesting online. So initially, for the Gavin Creel situation, they announced only a partial dimming, so one theatre from each theatre owner was going to dim the lights, not all of them. So if you don't know, the practice usually when someone big in the theatre world passes away, Broadway will dim its lights for a minute or two. It happened here in the West End, and it happens quite often. But sometimes they do only a partial dimming, so this means that only a few theatres or theatres that they worked in will be dimmed rather than all of them. And this has always been a bit of a bone of contention, because it's a bit awkward to say, well, you're not quite deserving of a full dimming, but this person is. And in Gavin Creel's case, he made such an impact on the theatre community at such a young age and still had so much more to give. It wasn't his fault that he died so young, and I just think it was wrong for them to not announce a full dimming in the first place. However, after this partial dimming was announced, some other theatres announced that they would be joining in. The Al Hirschfeld, which is where he did Hair, and also the Eugene O'Neill, which is where he did the Book of Mormon. They announced they would also be dimming their lights on the same day. However, people still weren't happy, and rightfully so, and a petition was launched online, and it received over 23,000 signatures saying that all the lights should be dimmed on Broadway. And all the big hitters of Broadway and all his friends and people like Audra McDonald are telling the Broadway League that they need to dim the lights, and ultimately the decision was changed, and they are doing a full dimming of the lights for each performer. So I just think it's disgusting it took this much effort for that to get through, and it took so long for them to decide on this. And the same thing happened for Marin Maisie when she died of cancer about 6 years ago. She was initially only given a partial dimming, but after much protesting from the theatre community, a full dimming was announced. And now they are looking into it, and they're going to change the way they do it and kind of re-evaluate how they classify who should get one and not, which is good in a way, but still, I think it's all just a very odd situation, and it could have been handled so much more sensitively and a lot better than it was. A few random bits from Broadway and the West End this week. The Box 5 Club has been launched by Andrew Lloyd Webber. So this is a new site which includes archives, behind-the-scenes content and previews of Andrew Lloyd Webber's work. And if you're a big fan of his stuff, you can sign up to the new newsletter where you get perks and early access and things like that. So I quite like this as an idea, especially for him. Why not? I mean, he's got a big following and he's got people who love his shows and all his work. So why not make a bit of... I mean, he doesn't necessarily need any more money, does he? He's a billionaire. But, you know, the record-breaking, Tony-winning play Stereophonic has been sued. So the Fleetwood Mac producer, Ken Kalai, has accused them of lifting scenes from his memoir, which detailed him working on the Fleetwood Mac album Rumours. So he has said he is suing for copying, publication, release, broadcast, performance and other exploitation of Stereophonic. And apparently the concept of the show is like for like of what happened with Fleetwood Mac and the recording of that album in the exact same year with the exact same amount of people and this, that and the other. So the writer of the play has said that, of course, the show has elements of the band Fleetwood Mac, but also has elements of other bands around the time as well. But it isn't a bio-musical, but the sewers are obviously saying otherwise. So that could be a very interesting turn of events for that play, and hopefully it doesn't cause too much ruckus and they don't have to completely rewrite the show, but it could go quite badly if the people suing from Fleetwood Mac win. Also at Romeo and Juliet with Rachel Zegler and Kit Connor, they are going to start providing open captioning, so subtitles basically, for performances at every single performance. So from certain seats, a screen will be visible above the set in front of these designated seats, and it means that there's always going to be the option for open captioning at every show. And I think this is a brilliant move for accessibility in theatre and making it more viable as a thing. And I think it's mainly because the theatre where they're doing it, the Circle in the Square, is a very adaptable space. It's in the round, they can do quite a lot with it and they can hide stuff more easily than if it was in a proscenium arch, traditional Broadway or West End house. There's been a few announcements this week with regards to theatrical buildings up and down the country. So the Arts Theatre in the West End is going to close for a major refurbishment next year if it is given the green light. It's currently not being greenlit, but it's looking like it could be. It's going to be a restoration of the building to make it more efficient. It's quite run down by all accounts and needs a bit of TLC. The theatre has apparently been at constant threat of closure due to the type of contracts that they use for the venue and leasing the venue, but now the new plans will hope to grow and secure the theatre's future. It's going to make the theatre bigger from 860 square metres to 1,044 square metres, and the theatre, if this all goes ahead as planned, will hopefully reopen by the end of 2027. It's always exciting when a West End venue gets a refurb and gets given a new lease of life, because it's not cheap and it takes a long time and you've got to decide the right time for that to happen. And obviously, with this possibly happening next year, this has meant that Choir of Man has announced its closure on the 31st of December this year. I imagine that probably would have still kept running if they weren't closing it, but the theatre needs work and it needs doing now rather than leaving it another year or two and it gets worse and worse and worse. So yes, the Arts Theatre is getting a big major refurb, possibly. The first National Centre for Musical Theatre could be built in the West Midlands. So this is going to be a world-leading musical theatre facility, and it's got the support of Birmingham councils and groups, and everyone seems to be behind it. The Arts Council are behind it, and it's going to be built in and around the Birmingham area from what I can work out. And this could be really exciting. And as I've said before, as I said earlier about my trip to Birmingham, they have some really great theatres and a really good theatrical scene, so I think it's a really good place to put it outside of London, and it's easy to get to from the capital and from other big cities, so I think it would be a fantastic opportunity to put something like that in Birmingham. And also, Swansea's Palace Theatre, which has been left to rot for years and years, is going to reopen as a business centre this November. So the theatre is over 120 years old and it's just kind of fallen into complete disrepair, but over this last couple of years they've been regenerating it and changing it back into a venue that can be used, not a theatrical venue but a business venue. So it is sad that it's not reopening as a theatre, and I would have hoped that that would have been a plan, but at least the building is still there and they haven't knocked it down and is being saved, and who knows, one day maybe it would be turned back into a theatre. We can hope, but I'm glad that the building itself has been saved. A little bit on awards season next year. The Tonys have announced the nomination date and the eligibility cutoff. So the eligibility cutoff will be April 27th. So that is the last day that something could open on Broadway. However, the last scheduled opening at the moment is the roundabout production of Pirates of Penzance, which is set to open on April 24th. But often those dates after that will be filled and it will be really chock-a-block over that final week with everything trying to get open at the same time. They've also said that the nominations themselves will be announced on the 1st of May. And also over here in the UK, the 25th annual What's on Stage Awards have announced that they will be at the London Palladium on the 9th of February. A few TV and film updates for you. Barbra Streisand has said that she is working on a multi-part documentary on her life, and it's been officially approved by her and she is fully on board, and it's going to feature never-seen-before footage, photos, audio and personal keepsakes from her big archive in her big basement that she keeps in her house, I imagine. And this will be similar to her book, My Name is Barbara, and she's kind of been doing a lot of promo surrounding her memoir and her life recently, but this will be really interesting to see and I cannot wait. We don't know when, there's been no timeline yet, but hopefully it will be in the near future. Also, Macbeth, starring Cush Jumbo and David Tennant, which is currently on in the West End, will be screened globally to cinemas on February the 5th, which is really good because tickets are really hard to get and they're quite expensive, so now I can just sit in a cinema for about £15 and watch it instead. And before we get on to the casting news, a little bit of producing news for you. Liza Minnelli is making her New York return in a producing sense. So she will be a producer on Drag the Musical, which is currently at New World Stages in New York, and this is the first time she's produced a full-length musical. She said in a statement, I'm not going to do the accent or try and do an impression, she said, "Kids, Drag the Musical is a work of art. It's so brilliant that I had to join as a producer. Join me at every performance. Yes, every performance." I'm not quite sure what she means, because I don't think she is there every show, but you never know. She might be. Right, let's delve into this casting news session we're about to go into. Charli D'Amelio, who is very famous for being the world's most followed TikTok star, will join the ensemble of Anne Juliet on Broadway. And this is a really clever idea, I think, because she is a dancer and she is a trained dancer and it was her profession and what she did before she became famous on TikTok. So it obviously is stunt casting to the highest degree. However, she does have the talent to back it up, so it kind of works for me, and I'm quite excited to see how she does. Annalie Ashford has joined the rotating cast of comedy and stage stars who are set to appear in All In, Comedy About Love. So this is a new show which is going to have a 10-week engagement on Broadway from the 11th of December. Some of the other people who are going to be in it include Alex Timbers, John Mulaney, Richard Kind, Lin-Manuel Miranda, Andrew Rannells, Jimmy Fallon, Hank Azaria, a really strong group of people, and it's going to be interesting to see how that works with them all kind of doing a week here and a week there and a few performances there. I'm not quite sure what it's going to be about necessarily. I assume a comedy about love, but I can't wait to see more about that. The Crown's Emma Corrin and Jason Watkins, who is in everything on British TV, will star alongside Cate Blanchett in The Seagull next March at the Barbican, which is brilliant. You already had Cate Blanchett, and now you've got two other brilliant actors supporting her. Trevor Dion Nicholas and Rachel Tucker will join Hadestown in the West End as Hades and Persephone, respectively, and they will join the show on the 15th of October. So the day of this release of this episode, which is the 15th of October. So, happy first show to them. Joanna Gleason will lead the world premiere of the play We Had a World for the Manhattan Theatre Club at New York City Centre, beginning in February next year. Joanna Gleason famously won a Tony Award for playing the baker's wife in the original Broadway production of Into the Woods, and there's been a bit of discourse about this online recently because Patti LuPone did an interview where she was promoting that new TV series on Disney Plus, Agatha All Along, which she is in. She was asked if she had to pick one person who she should have won the Tony over. She said Joanna Gleason for Into the Woods. I strongly disagree with her, and I do think Joanna Gleason's performance in that is a masterclass, and no one's quite been able to do it the same since. But also, Patti LuPone was playing Reno Sweeney in a revival of Anything Goes. Yes, Sutton Foster won a Tony for that, but Into the Woods is a better show than Anything Goes, and The Baker's Wife is a much harder part to do. Max Harwood will lead the London premiere of the Percy Jackson musical The Lightning Thief. He recently starred in Stranger Things, The First Shadow, and also played Jamie in the film version of Everybody's Talking About Jamie, and that musical opens this November. Lauren Drew, Jordan Luke Gage, Leighton Williams, Darren Bennett and Rob Houchin are just some of the cast leading Titanic in the West End at the Criterion Theatre later this year. Oh my god, what a stacked group of performers. They've really got kind of the best of the really popular group of musical theatre performers and shove them into a show that's going to be really popular. I was already excited about this and really intrigued by it, but now with this cast, it's excited me even more. Joaquina Kalukango will no longer be appearing as Sarah in the Ragtime concert as was previously announced. So she had replaced Joy Woods, who has gone off to do Gypsy, but now she's been replaced by Nichelle Lewis, who's recently starred as Dorothy in The Wiz in the recent Broadway revival. So we're 3 Sarahs in, but we finally got the one who should be doing it, and that is Nichelle Lewis. Sunita will be playing Mama Morton in the UK tour of Chicago, in Bradford and in Stoke, replacing Brenda Edwards, who unfortunately can't perform at those dates, but you've got Sunita instead, so what more could you want? And another pop star from around the same time, Toya Wilcox, will star in Now That's What I Call a Musical at the Edinburgh Playhouse next February. She'll be making a guest appearance after her short-lived time on Strictly. Alex Young and Cameron Blakely have replaced Lauren Drew and Rufus Hound in the concert production of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, which is going to be at the end of November at the London Palladium with Ramin Karimloo. Really excited for this show to have another production over here, and I missed out on its original West End run, so I will try and get along to that if I can. The likes of Jordan Fisher and Kiala Settle and Stephanie Styles will lead the Encore's production of Urinetown next February. I was meant to do this show at college. I remembered this when I was doing the research for the episode. I was meant to do this, but then COVID curtailed it and we never ended up doing it, and it was all just kind of thrown away and we just never did it again. I learnt a few songs for it and a few dances as well, but then we never did it. I was just in the ensemble, but it was quite a fun show from what I knew of the short amount of rehearsal time we had. And Lilias White will return to Hadestown on Broadway. She will succeed Stephanie Mills, who is closing out her run on October the 22nd, and she previously replaced Andre de Shields in the production Lilias White, and she was so well loved that she's coming back for another run. So this episode's Fin to the Woods vaguely fun fact is linked to Becoming Nancy. So the show itself is based upon a novel called Becoming Nancy, and that is written by Terry Ronald. And it was only upon researching him after being to see the show that I found out that he was a kind of vocal arranger and songwriter for people such as Kylie Minogue, Girls Aloud, The Saturdays, Lulu, Jerry Halliwell and Atomic Kitten. How fun's that? Thank you once again for listening to the Fin to the Woods podcast and listening to me ramble along. Please do leave your reviews on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify to help me to get up those charts and to get more people involved with the podcast. Do share with your friends and family, and I will talk to you again very soon.